Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a close look at two major players in the microblogging world, X, formerly Twitter, and the challenger, Threads.
That's right. We've gathered quite a bit of source material articles, some research, and importantly, what users themselves are saying in places like Reddit. We want to really dig into the differences, the similarities, basically what makes each one tick, based only on this info.
Yeah, the mission here is to help you sort of navigate this. Threads really burst onto the scene, didn't it? Right when X was going through all those changes under Elon Musk, and lots of people were looking around for alternatives.
Exactly. And the sources give us a pretty interesting picture, from like the hard numbers on growth and features all the way to the very subjective day-to-day feel of using these apps based on user comments.
Oh, let's get into it. This rivalry, what do the sources actually tell us?
So let's start with the basics. Threads, launched by Meta Instagram's parent company July 5th, 2023. And sources are pretty clear. It was designed as a direct Twitter competitor.
Right. And Twitter had just officially become X a couple of months before that, April 2023. Though, yeah, you still see Twitter used a lot in the sources when talking about its history, or even sometimes now. We'll stick to what the material says.
And the initial pickup for Threads was, well, pretty staggering. The data showed 30 million downloads day one.
30 million. Wow.
Yeah, then 70 million in just a couple of days, and it hit 100 million users in only a week.
That kind of speed was just, yeah, unprecedented for a new social app. Blew other Twitter competitors out of the water.
And that definitely got X's attention. There were reports in July 2023, mentioned in the sources, that X sent a legal letter to Meta,
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that.
accusing them of hiring ex-Twitter folks to steal trade secrets. Meta denied it, said none of those former employees worked on the Threads team.
And the sources highlighted Elon Musk's comment at the time, something like, competition is fine, cheating is not. So, yeah, clearly some tension there from the start.
Okay, so what can you actually do on these platforms? The basics. X, famously, has that 280-character limit for standard posts.
But Threads gives you more room, right? Up to 500 characters, the sources say.
Exactly. And the insight there that the sources touch on is how that changes things. 500 characters means you can often get a more complete thought out in one go.
Less need for those multi-part threads, ironically.
Right, which was sort of the workaround on X, so it potentially changes the feel of the conversations.
Both are big on visuals, though. X lets you add, up to 4 photos, a GIF, or a video. Standard users get about 2 minutes, 20 seconds.
Yep, though premium subscribers get longer video options. Threads, leaning on its Instagram connection, allows videos up to 5 minutes long. And you can include up to 10 items, photos or videos in a single post.
So definitely pushing more visual content there, it seems.
Seems that way. The sources noted that media limit and the Instagram link often nudge Threads content in that direction.
And monetization. X has subscriptions, ad revenue sharing for premium users.
Right. Threads, at the time the sources were written, didn't have ads. But, being part of Meta, the expectation was very much that ads would be coming eventually. It's plugged into that huge advertising network.
Makes sense. What about building smaller groups? X has communities, polls.
Yeah, those are established features. Threads, as of late 2024, according to the sources, was working on its own version, apparently called Loops, internally. So trying to build out similar tools.
Okay, so moving from just posting to interaction and finding stuff.
Yeah.
Core things, posting, liking, commenting, follow, they both have those.
But a big difference the sources really highlighted, direct messages.
Yeah.
DMs, X, has them built in for private chats.
Threads doesn't, which, yeah, some sources pointed out felt a bit odd.
Right. Given Meta runs Instagram DMs, Messenger, WhatsApp, you'd think linking to Instagram DMs, at least, would be straightforward. But nope, no native one-on-one messaging.
Interesting. What about search? That was another point of comparison.
Definitely. X's search was consistently described in the sources as way more powerful. You can find trending news, keywords, people, hashtags easily.
And Threads search started out pretty limited.
Very basic, yeah. Mostly just searching for user accounts at first. The sources did say updates were being tested later, like late 2024, early 2025, to improve finding actual content and trending topics.
And discovery through tags. Hashtags are, fundamental to X.
Totally. But Threads launched without hashtags, which sources saw as a huge miss, especially since Instagram uses them so heavily.
They added topic tags later, though, didn't they? Sort of serving the same purpose.
They did, yeah. As for feeds, both have them. Threads has the To You algorithmic feed and a following feed, but customization was pretty limited initially.
Whereas X gives you more control over feeds, and it have that whole explore page for trends, news, sports.
Exactly. Threads didn't really have a direct equivalent to the Explore page, based on the sources from late 2024. And some user feedback specifically mentioned preferring X's ability to make lists and customize feeds.
Okay, let's talk user experience, how you actually use them, who's using them. X has, established desktop and mobile apps.
Threads started very mobile first
Mm.
and deeply tied to Instagram. You needed an Instagram account. A web version did roll out late 2023, but sources described it as basically feeling like the mobile app just stretched onto a bigger screen.
That Instagram requirement is key, though. Can't even read threads without an Insta account, right? Really locks it into the Meta ecosystem.
Absolutely. X is standalone, no other account needed.
Interface-wise, the sources seem to say they looked kind of similar, focus on media, reactions.
Generally, yeah. Though the lack of hashtags on threads initially made it look a bit different.
Now, the user numbers, this gets interesting, especially looking at the data cited up to around April 2025. Threads hit 320 million monthly active users.
Which is huge growth. Adding 200 million users in the last year alone, according to those sources, shows real momentum.
Meanwhile, X claimed a larger number overall, 600 million active users.
But its growth was much slower, only adding about 50 million in that same time frame. So the rate of growth for Threads was way higher. Although the sources did raise some questions about how reliable X's reported numbers actually were.
And just briefly, the other alternatives mentioned, Bluesky had around 35 million by then, growing but slower than Threads. Mastodon, much smaller, less than 900K active users.
So yeah, based on those numbers, the main mass market fight seems to be X versus Threads.
That explosive Threads signup wasn't the whole story, was it? The sources also talked about retention problems.
Oh, big time. After that initial huge hype, Threads saw a pretty significant drop in active users and how long people spend on the app each day. By June 2024, monthly active users were reportedly down around 40 million.
40 million from that initial surge.
Yeah, stabilized around there. And average time spent went from maybe 30 minutes a day near launch down to about 10 minutes. Sources even estimated something like 60 million users uninstalled Threads in 2024.
Wow, 60 million uninstalls. That's
Yep.
striking. What were the reasons users gave in the sources for dropping off?
A lot of it seemed to tie back to those missing features compared to X. The weak search, not having a good way to discover real-time stuff.
Difficulty finding their specific communities or people they followed.
Exactly. And lots of complaints about the algorithm, the For You feed, showing stuff they just weren't interested in. Plus, that initial lack of a really good web version and being forced to link to Instagram, those seem to be factors for some people too.
Okay, let's shift to privacy and safety. Sources noted concerns here for both platforms.
Yeah, neither gets a free pass.
Mm-hmm.
Both require you to agree to pretty extensive personal data collection. Threads policy was reported as being very similar to Instagram's.
And the App Store comparisons mentioned in the sources showed X collecting data linked to you, data used for tracking across other sites, and even some data supposedly not linked to you.
Right. And privacy experts quoted in the sources added a note of caution. Those lists often say data may be collected. It gives them wiggle room. And the lists aren't always 100% accurate reflections of actual practice, according to the experts.
There was that issue with Threads launching in the EU, too, wasn't there? Delayed.
Yep, that was interesting. Tied directly to the EU's Digital Markets Act. The rules about how big ecosystems like Meta share data between their services like Instagram and Threads.
So because X is standalone, it didn't hit that specific hurdle immediately.
Exactly. Threads did eventually launch in the EU after making changes to comply, though.
Account dilution was another friction point mentioned, harder on Threads.
Initially, much harder, according to the sources. Deleting Threads meant you had to delete your linked Instagram account, too. You could deactivate Threads separately, but full deletion was tied.
Oof, that's a big commitment.
Yeah. Meta spokespeople reportedly said they were looking into separating them, but the sources didn't give a timeline. Deactivating X was described as comparatively easy.
And that difficulty opting out, sources suggested, could attract regulatory attention, like from the FTC.
Potentially, yeah. Especially given Meta's size and existing scrutiny. It raises antitrust questions, too.
And the sources were pretty clear. All of that data Meta collects across Facebook, Instagram, Threads, even using the Meta Pixel on other websites. It's mostly about targeted ads.
Right, even if Threads didn't have ads yet. Sources gave examples of sensitive data sharing via metapixels, things like browsing history, searches, items added to shopping carts on sites using it, which apparently led to lawsuits against companies using it, like hospitals, and against Meta itself.
Okay, let's really get into the user feedback, the culture. This is where those Reddit comments and things get really vivid, if sometimes contradictory.
Yeah, highly subjective stuff here, but you see themes. A lot of users, particularly commenting on X after the Musk takeover, used really strong negative language, called it a cesspool, toxic, full of rage bait.
Rage bait stuff designed just to make people angry for clicks.
Exactly. Notice an increase in bots, political ads, that sort of thing.
Whereas Threads, especially early on, was often described as friendlier, less
Yeah.
toxic.
Generally, yeah. People often mentioned it felt like a more positive space compared to what they felt X had become. Less of that intense negativity.
But the experience with engagement on Threads sounded really mixed in the feedback. Some said they got better engagement initially,
While others felt like they were just shouting into the void, posts getting no traction.
and the algorithm got a lot of criticism too, right? Showing irrelevant stuff.
Definitely. Common complaints were the For You feed pushing content users didn't care about, not being good for real-time news, and always defaulting back to For You instead of the following feed they actually wanted.
Which led some users, according to the sources, to still prefer X for live events or news, even with the toxicity issues.
Finding your niche was another thing. X, with features like lists, was seen as better for following specific groups, journalists, political commentators, or for live stuff like sports commentary.
And some Threads users struggled to find those same communities or key people they followed.
Yeah, either the people weren't there, weren't active, or it was just harder to recreate those specific connections.
What about the type of content on Threads? Some users mention, well, lots of animal videos.
Yeah, that came up. Animal videos, overused memes, maybe a lot of posts looking for congratulations. I got sober, I graduated. Some felt it lacked the kind of substantive discussion or the specific accounts, like news outlets or experts, they wanted.
Now, we have to touch on the political side of the user feedback and the censorship concerns. It got pretty heated in the sources with strong opposing views. It's crucial we just report what users perceived or issues reported in the sources, not endorse any of it.
Absolutely critical. So looking at the feedback, some users described X using very strong political terms. Things like right-wing nutjob platform, even Nazi cesspool.
Mm.
This reflected deep unhappiness with the platform's direction under Musk, seeing the freedom of speech pushed negatively.
But then, other users described Threads and Instagram with equally strong but opposite labels, like more towards the right, or calling Threads a left-wing Twitter, where people complain about the right. Their view is that X's changes had actually revealed a supposed leftist agenda that was hidden before, so really polarized views there.
And the views on censorship were just as divided. Some users reported concerns about Threads, things like perceived shadow banning for expressing blunt opinions, political content filters being too aggressive, or citing external reports, like one from Human Rights Watch, alleging censorship of content related to Palestine.
Contrasting with X's move towards left moderation, which again split users, some saw it positively as uncovering suppressed views. Others saw it very negatively, leading to what they called harmful content and abuse flourishing. These conflicting accounts really highlight how differently users experience these platforms, often through their own political lens. Okay, so X and Threads are the big two, but the sources did mention alternatives. Bluesky came up.
Yeah, Bluesky got highlighted as one gaining some steam, especially after opening up to everyone in early 2024 and with all the X drama ongoing.
What were its selling points, according to the sources?
Things like a familiar Twitter-like feel, but crucially, a default chronological feed, no algorithm pushing stuff at you. It attracted journalists. Some politicians like AOC were mentioned. It had strong blocking tools like a nuclear block.
Didn't suppress links either, apparently, and verification was different.
Right, no suppressing links to competitors. Verification was based on owning a domain name, not paying a monthly fee, which some preferred. And sources also noted that groups who felt unsafe on X, like some transgender users, were key in building early communities on Bluesky.
Gotcha. So looking ahead, both platforms are still changing fast. What did the sources say about future prospects, especially for Threads?
Well, it's clear Meta is still pouring resources into Threads. The sources listed a ton of features being tested or rolled out looking towards mid-2025. Things like improving the desktop version, much better search, including date ranges and maybe AI summaries, adding profile interests, cross-posting to Instagram stories.
Multiple profile links, testing ads in places like the US and Japan, spoiler tags, post templates, image tagging, analytics for mobile. The list goes on.
Profile switching, active status indicators, maybe even bumping up media limits again up to 20 items tested, pinned columns, a recent filter, auto-archiving posts, hiding specific words, testing an in-app camera. Even potential cross-posting with Facebook was floated.
So a lot of those key missing features people complained about early on, better search, discovery, tags, tools for power users, easier deletion, they were definitely being worked on or tested by mid-2025 based on that info.
Absolutely. And of course, the expected arrival of ads on Threads. That's a big future change that will definitely shake up the experience.
There was also that mention of ActivityPub support.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. ActivityPub is the tech standard behind the Fediverse.
The Fediverse being that network of interconnected, often independent social platforms like Mastodon.
Exactly. If Threads supports ActivityPub, it could become interoperable with those platforms. So theoretically, you could follow or interact with someone on Mastodon from within Threads.
And maybe take your followers with you if you left Threads.
That's the potential promise. But the sources also warned this raises new privacy questions. How would Meta handle sharing your data with all these third-party Fediverse servers outside its control? That's a big unknown.
Okay, so pulling all this together from the source material, Threads had this incredible explosive launch, clearly fueled by the Instagram connection and widespread unhappiness with X's changes.
But it really struggled to keep those initial users engaged. Had to play catch-up on features people expected, especially compared to the very mature toolset X already had.
And X, despite the rebrand, the controversies, the user complaints about toxicity and ads, it still claimed a much bigger user base and had more developed features, particularly for discovery, search, DMs, third-party tools.
But its growth had slowed right down, and those user issues were definitely driving people to look elsewhere, according to the sources.
And we saw newer platforms like Bluesky carving out niches, offering different things like chronological feeds appealing to specific groups.
So the better platform, based on everything we read, there's just no single answer. It really boils down to what you, the listener, are looking for.
Right. Do you want maximum reach or maybe closer connections? Is real-time news your priority or finding a specific community? How much tolerance do you have for ads or potential toxicity versus wanting a perhaps cleaner, maybe quieter space?
And you have to remember, both X and Threads are still evolving incredibly quickly. Features are being added constantly. The cultures are shifting. What's true today might not be true in 6 months.
Which leads us to a final thought for you to mull over, drawing from all this material. We saw many users leave X looking for something better. Threads grew incredibly fast, but hasn't fully replaced X for everyone, facing its own hurdles with retention and features. And both come with significant, though different, privacy considerations highlighted in the sources. So, where does the search for the ideal place for public talk or close connections actually lead next? Is one platform likely to eventually dominate again, or are we heading towards a future where users are more fragmented, spread across various platforms tailored to very specific needs, communities, and maybe even privacy preferences?